Today, we will delve into a subject that is sometimes overlooked, despite the fact that it affects millions of people all over the world: mental health illnesses. On a global scale, did you know that 1 in every 8 persons on the planet is affected by a mental health issue of some kind? The gravity of this problem in our culture is brought into further focus by the astonishing statistic that was presented. Disorders of mental health are everywhere, affecting people from all walks of life and affecting a wide range of people. In the year 2019, there were about 1 billion people all over the world who were struggling with a variety of mental health issues. These conditions can have significant repercussions, including the inability to work, the development of disabilities, and even criminal behavior. We are able to differentiate between serious disorders such as schizophrenia and personality disorders such as neurosis and psychopathy among these conditions. The sad story of Nicola Edgington is one that shines light on the intricacies of mental health and is a significant example of this. Beginning with her turbulent youth, which was characterized by disruptive conduct and turmoil within the family, Nicola's story begins. In spite of the fact that she had the appearance of an angel, Nicola exhibited a diabolical disposition from a young age, which led to contention within her family as well as problems at school. Nicola's behavior became increasingly unpredictable during her adolescent years, which was the beginning of the signs that she was having problems with her mental health developing. After Nicola made the transition into adulthood, her life became a rough journey that was plagued by difficulties related to her mental health. Nicola's relationships were frequently turbulent, and her struggles with mental illness became more intense, despite the fact that she experienced intermittent periods of stability. Due to the fact that she was experiencing religious hallucinations and delusions, her reality became confused, which resulted in strained relationships and difficulty in managing her children. There was a close connection between Nicola's struggles with mental illness and her interactions with the legal system and mental health agencies. The interactions that Nicola had with the authorities frequently failed to provide her with the necessary support and intervention, despite the fact that she made efforts to address her condition. The complications that arise when attempting to address mental health concerns within the framework of the criminal justice system were brought to light by her criminal background and her recurrent interactions with law enforcement. Nicola's mental health issue reached its most severe point on October 10, 2011, when it reached its peak. Carrie Clark and Sally Hodkin were the victims of her violent attacks, which precipitated her deteriorating state and resulted in the attacks. In spite of Nicola's efforts to seek assistance, her pleadings were ignored, and a tragic event then transpired. The tragic events that transpired on that day brought to light the critically important requirement for enhanced mental health care and intervention. Legal processes were initiated against Nicola in the aftermath of the attacks, with the goal of addressing both her acts and the underlying mental health concerns that she was experiencing. The testimony of psychiatrists provided insight into Nicola's condition, which led to a verdict and sentencing that attempted to strike a balance between accountability and considerations of her mental health. The decision made by the court demonstrated the complications that are involved in addressing mental health within the framework of the criminal justice system. When it comes to tackling issues related to mental health, the case of Nicola has sparked a discussion about accountability and negligence. Given the circumstances, did Nicola receive an appropriate amount of punishment? Is it possible that the failure of law enforcement and mental health agencies to give proper support contributed to the escalation of the tragedy? The viewers are prompted to contemplate the more widespread systemic problems that are associated with mental health treatment and the criminal justice system by these inquiries. Let's delve into the intricate realm of mental health issues, where statistics give a clear picture of the challenges that millions of people all over the world, including ourselves, endure. The most recent statistics indicate that 1 in every 8 persons on the planet is struggling with a mental health issue of some magnitude. This startling statistic highlights the broad occurrence of these disorders, as well as the far-reaching influence that they have on people, as well as society as a whole. In addition to the misery that they cause for the individual, the consequences of mental health illnesses frequently present themselves in a variety of facets of life. These illnesses can considerably affect a person's quality of life in a variety of ways, including the impairing of daily functioning, the hindering of relationships, and the impeding of professional possibilities. Furthermore, the economic burden that mental health illnesses impose on society is enormous. This burden is a result of the costs associated with healthcare, the lost productivity, and the expenditures that are made for social welfare. There are two primary categories that can be used to classify mental health illnesses: severe disorders and personality disorders. These are the two categories that may be used to classify mental health diseases. In most cases, serious disorders, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depressive disorder, are characterized by disruptions in thinking, emotion, and behavior. These disturbances greatly limit functioning and necessitate comprehensive therapy and support. Let's take a look at the traumatic path that Nicola Edgington has been on, whose turbulent life shines light on the difficulties of mental health concerns from a young age. The beginning of Nicola's journey takes place against the backdrop of a broken family and a turbulent childhood, respectively, which lays the groundwork for the difficulties she would encounter in her later years. Nicola was born on September 9, 1980, and she grew up in a home that was divided and tumultuous throughout her childhood. Nicola Edgington's parents, Marion and Harry Edgington, eventually gave in to the pressures of their problematic marriage, which resulted in the breakup of their marriage when she was still a little child. The behavior that Nicola displayed as a kid, in spite of the attempts that her parents made to establish stability, was a precursor of the chaos that was to come. Beginning at a young age, Nicola displayed problematic behavior that was marked by aggressiveness, defiance, and a propensity for provoking conflict. It was common knowledge that she had a combative disposition at school, and she routinely engaged in conflict with both her peers and those in positions of authority. As Nicola entered her teenage years, these early indicators of disruptive conduct indicated that she was struggling with underlying mental health concerns that would continue to have an impact on her life. As Nicola made the move into adulthood, her life continued to be filled with difficulties, which were made even more difficult by the fact that she was still struggling with issues related to her mental health. Nicola's journey was marked by turbulent relationships, unsuccessful pregnancies, and a plunge into the depths of mental illness, despite the fact that she experienced short periods of stability every so often. There were a number of turbulent relationships that Nicola experienced during her adult life. These partnerships were defined by instability and dysfunction. Nicola's personal relationships were a reflection of the turmoil that existed within her own mind. This was evident in her connection with partners who were involved in illicit activities, as well as in her turbulent marriage to a Jamaican man. Nicola's issues with her mental health ultimately caused some of her relationships to fall apart, despite the fact that other relationships provided her with brief periods of comfort. It was Nicola's experiences with pregnancy and motherhood, which were laden with pain and tragedy, that played a pivotal role in her adult life. Nicola's hopes of becoming a mother were destroyed after she experienced a string of unsuccessful pregnancies, one of which was a traumatic event in which her partner physically assaulted her while she was experiencing pregnancy. As a result, she is currently struggling with great sadness and loss. Nicola's issues with her mental health continued to worsen throughout her adult life, showing themselves in the form of hallucinations, religious delusions, and paranoid ideations. Her involvement in a religious group contributed further to her decline into psychosis, which in turn led her to believe in fantastical ideas of demonic forces and visions of the end of the world. Not only did Nicola's delusions cause her to become detached from the world around her, but they also made her already delicate mental state much more severe, causing her to fall further and further into the abyss of psychosis. A gloomy shade was cast over Nicola's relationships and parenting as a result of the impact of her mental health concerns, which stretched beyond her own psyche. Her erratic conduct and delusional views caused her connections to become so stressed that they were on the verge of shattering. As a result, she left behind a trail of broken links and crushed trust in her wake. As a mother, Nicola's issues with mental illness hindered her capacity to provide a secure and nurturing home for her children, leaving them susceptible to the unpredictable turbulence of her own inner turmoil. Nicola's children were left defenseless as a result. In Nicola's turbulent path into adulthood, her struggles with mental health proved to be her most powerful foe, and they shaped the trajectory of her life in ways that were both deep and devastating. Nicola's narrative, however, serves as a heartbreaking reminder of the fundamental intricacies of mental illness and the essential need for compassion and assistance for individuals who struggle with its relentless hold. This is despite the fact that Nicola's troubles are a source of darkness. Nicola's rocky journey through adulthood was further complicated by her involvement with the criminal justice system, as well as her interactions with mental health agencies and institutions. They all contributed to the complexity of her situation. Her history of criminal behavior, which was characterized by a string of violent outbursts and interactions with law enforcement, highlighted the significant influence that her untreated mental illness had on her behavior and the choices that she brought about. Nicola's criminal record created a distressing picture of a woman who was gripped by the throes of mental illness and who struggled with inner demons that frequently manifested themselves in the world in ways that were both violent and unexpected. Nicola's confrontations with police authorities were a disturbing evidence to the depths of her decline into psychosis. These interactions ranged from petty altercations and acts of vandalism to more serious felonies, including assaults and threats with deadly weapons. The interactions that Nicola had with mental health agencies and institutions provided her with fleeting flashes of optimism amidst the despair that she was experiencing as her criminal activity continued to escalate. Nicola's journey through the mental health system was fraught with difficulties and setbacks, ranging from psychiatric evaluations and assessments to temporary stays in psychiatric wards and treatment facilities. This exemplifies the shortcomings of a system that is not adequately equipped to deal with the complexities of severe mental illness. The fragmented nature of mental health care and the absence of comprehensive intervention strategies left Nicola imprisoned in a cycle of crisis and relapse, despite the attempts of the authorities to identify and treat her condition. There was no comprehensive intervention strategy available. Nicola's access to the care and support she so desperately needed was further hampered by the fact that there were insufficient resources, institutions that were understaffed, and bureaucratic red tape. As a result, she was forced to negotiate the complex mental health system on her own. Nicola's condition continued to deteriorate, and as a result, her interactions with authorities grew increasingly fraught with tension and frustration. This culminated in disastrous consequences for both Nicola and other people. Nicola's screams for assistance frequently fell on deaf ears, overlooked, or dismissed by a system that was ill-prepared to manage the complexity of serious mental illness. This was the case despite the fact that she continuously pleaded for assistance and intervention. With the benefit of hindsight, the tragic story of Nicola serves as a sobering reminder of the urgent need for reform within the criminal justice system and mental health services. It also highlights the critical importance of early intervention, comprehensive treatment, and compassionate care for those who are coping with severe mental illness. We can only have any hope of preventing similar tragedies, like the one that occurred with Nicola, if we make strong efforts to treat the underlying causes of mental illness and give proper care and resources. In the early morning hours of October 10, 2011, Nicola Edgington's already unstable mental state teetered on the edge of breakdown. This was the culmination of years of untreated psychosis and delusions that she had been experiencing. As Nicola's spiral into insanity reached its climax, she was consumed by inner anguish and tortured by hallucinations. This culmination set the stage for a catastrophic chain of events that would forever affect the lives of those who were caught in her path. As the early hours of that fatal morning approached, Nicola's delusions transformed into violent urges, causing a wave of horror to be unleashed onto victims who were unaware of what was happening. Carrie Clark, an artist who was 22 years old at the time, found herself in the middle of a nightmare when Nicola started a ferocious attack while holding a knife with terrifying intent. Carrie fought back against her attacker with quick reflexes that were born out of simple survival instinct. She was able to stop Nicola's lethal onslaught and call for assistance in an attempt to save her life. On the other hand, Nicola's rampage was not yet ended. In a sickening display of resolve, she set her eyes on a new target, Sally Hodkin, who was 58 years old at the time of her death, and whose life was brutally cut short in a vicious assault of violence. The full degree of Nicola's insanity was laid naked for all to see, as her victims lay bleeding and broken. This stark reminder of the horrific toll that untreated mental illness can take was a chilling reminder of the full extent of her insanity. In the aftermath of the attacks, Nicola's interactions with officials provided fleeting glimpses of her desperate attempts to seek assistance despite the turmoil and confusion that ensued. Nicola's frantic calls for assistance were either ignored by a system that was not able to appreciate the gravity of her worsening mental state, or ignored entirely. The screams for assistance that Nicola made while she was trapped in a nightmare that she had created for herself were ignored, and she left a path of destruction in her wake. Nicola's horrific rampage came to a fatal conclusion as the sun rose over a city that was seized by shock and amazement. This tragic event is a grim witness to the disastrous consequences that can result from untreated mental illness. In the aftermath of the devastation, concerns continued to be raised, serving as eerie reminders of the critical need for reform within the mental health system, as well as the criminal justice system. The 10th of October, 2011, would be a day that would forever be engraved in memory as a day of terrible agony and anguish for Nicola Edgington and her victims. It would be a striking reminder of the human cost of untreated mental illness. After Nicola Edgington was taken into custody, the court system was faced with the difficult challenge of navigating her terrifying spiral into madness, as well as the devastating ramifications of her acts. At the same time as the wheels of justice were turning, Nicola found herself forced into a courtroom drama that would eventually determine her fate. A disturbing look into the depths of Nicola's illness was provided by the testimony of psychiatrists, who painted a portrayal of a woman who was consumed by delusions and alienated from reality. Legal arguments grappled with concerns of guilt and accountability, attempting to make sense of the hazy boundaries that exist between insanity and malevolence. Following the conclusion of the proceedings, the court reached a decision and handed down a punishment that attempted to strike a balance between the requirements of justice and the need of compassion. It was determined that Nicola Edgington was responsible for the acts she committed. Yet, her sentence reflected a recognition of the significant influence that her untreated mental illness had on her actions. With a heavy heart and a grave feeling of duty, the court handed down its ruling, which sentenced Nicola to a life of incarceration, with the option of parole after 37 years of imprisonment. It was a finding that acknowledged the terrible pain that was caused by Nicola's mental illness, while also holding her accountable for the irreparable harm that she had perpetrated upon her victims. This verdict pointed to the sad complexity of Nicola's story, as the consequences of Nicola's reign of terror were determined within the walls of the courtroom. Those who had been affected by her reign of terror experienced a feeling of closure. Nevertheless, in the midst of the reverberations of the verdict and the sentencing, there were still concerns that lingered. Chilling reminders of the urgent need for reform within the worlds of mental health treatment and the criminal justice system. For Nicola Edgington, the judicial processes were the climax of a journey that was plagued with hopelessness and desperation. They served as a sharp reminder of the horrific toll that untreated mental illness takes on individuals as well as on society as a whole. As she faced the possibility of spending the rest of her life in prison, Nicola's experience acted as a somber cautionary tale, a warning of the terrible consequences that can result from neglecting to address the underlying causes of mental illness with compassion and understanding. The tragic story of Nicola Edgington inspired a significant debate about the nature of accountability and the appropriateness of punishment in situations when mental illness interacts with criminality. This debate was triggered as the series of events unfolded. At the same time that viewers were struggling to come to terms with the eerie details of Nicola's spiral into lunacy and violence, they found themselves confronting unsettling concerns of justice, compassion, and the shortcomings of the structures that are assigned with the responsibility of protecting society. A number of individuals argued that the sentence of life in prison for Nicola, with the chance of parole after 37 years, was an appropriate punishment for the horrible crimes that she committed. The argument that they put out was that even while her severe mental illness unquestionably had a part in her acts, this did not absolve her of responsibility for the irreparable harm that she had caused to the people who were affected by her activities. The punishment that was handed down to Nicola, in their opinion, struck a careful balance between accountability and compassion. It acknowledged the intricacies of her case while simultaneously upholding the necessary requirements of justice. Others, on the other hand, brought up some very worrisome questions regarding the role that law enforcement and mental health agencies played in Nicola's case, noting instances in which critical interventions had failed to fulfill their intended purpose. There were gaps in communication and coordination among the different agencies that were responsible with managing Nicola's care, as well as lost opportunities for early intervention and treatment, according to the findings of the investigation. According to their point of view, the sad course of events that Nicola went through was illustrative of the systemic inadequacies that exist within the mental health care and criminal justice systems, highlighting the critical need for reform and accountability. The audience were confronted with a basic question as they struggled to come to terms with these weighty issues. Where exactly does the line between accountability and compassion lie? To what extent is it possible to hold individuals accountable for their conduct while simultaneously acknowledging the significant impact that mental illness has on individual behavior. Furthermore, what part do society and its institutions play in both worsening the pain of persons who are struggling with mental health issues and in alleviating that suffering via their actions? When all was said and done, the story of Nicola Edgington served as a sobering reminder of the essential need for empathy, understanding, and reform within our society. As viewers pondered on her sad journey, they were left with a frightening sense of responsibility. They were confronted with the realization that it is our collective job to address the complexity of mental illness with courage, compassion, and unflinching resolve. When we consider the traumatic path that Nicola Edgington has been on, we are pushed to address the profound ramifications of her story, as well as the urgent need for society introspection and reform. From her troubled childhood, which was marked by early indicators of mental illness, to the tragic events that occurred on October 10, 2011, Nicola's life serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive impact that untreated mental health illnesses can have on both the individual and the community. The flaws that allowed her calls for help to go unnoticed, her difficulties to go neglected, and her spiral into madness to go unchecked are brought to light by her plunge into violence and disorder, which reveals the systemic failures that exist within our mental health care and criminal justice systems. While we are struggling to make sense of the complexity of Nicola's situation, we are driven to confront unsettling facts about accountability, compassion, and the significant influence that mental illness has on the behavior of individuals. In spite of everything, there is a glimmer of optimism that shines through the darkness of Nicola's story. It is a call to action for our society to have greater empathy, understanding, and transformation. Having the opportunity to bear witness to the tragedy that befell Nicola serves to remind us of our joint responsibility to address the intricacies of mental illness with bravery, compassion, and unyielding determination. It is only by a determined effort to address the underlying causes of mental illness, demolish systemic barriers to care, and cultivate a culture of empathy and understanding that we can have any hope of preventing future tragedies, such to the one that occurred with Nicola. As we get to the end of our voyage, I would like to extend an invitation to you to subscribe to this channel with me so that you may access additional information that will provoke thinking and conversations on important issues that are currently confronting our society. At the same time that we are working toward the goal of creating a future that is brighter and more compassionate for everyone, let us begin together on a voyage of discovery, reflection, and transformation.